modern societies with a multitude of players involved. And in the meantime, I focused on environmental policies, I mean, in my postgraduate studies, and I further realized the importance of policy integration to solve environmental problems, because environmental problems has an interdependent relationship with other policy areas, and there were a number of difficulties in solving environmental problems and implementing environmental policies because of that interdependence and complex interdependence, and somehow the relationship between the other policy areas. So on the one hand, we had resistance from vested interests. On the other hand, the path dependence of already existing institutional traditions, they all played major roles in solving environmental problems, or they provided, certain blockages to efforts towards solving environmental problems. Then I started to realize that policy process is a complex process. It's not a top-down mechanism. It needs further finer mechanisms to sort out, to solve certain problems. And under normal conditions, public policy and public administration has similar regions for the solution of problems. They focus on state and state institutions. Public administration asks questions about the state institutions, how they are managed, and seek to answers to questions on efficiency, equity, and accountability. Public policy, on the other hand, focuses on decisions made by public authorities and asks questions on policy formulation, policy implementation, and their impact on general public. What I mean, their monitoring and evaluation at the end of the day. Public policy is a problem-oriented field of study and aims to solve complex problems of modern societies, like those we face in 21st century. Well, what kind of challenges are available for us for public policies in the new century? Well, a number of problems. These challenges, they originate from technological developments, global inequalities, ecological problems, demographic changes, health issues, and changing societal expectations. Well, to be honest, complexity is the possible keyword for the problems of the 21st century. And we should realize that solutions for public problems now are solutions for complex problems require new approach, and because they are complex and involves multi-actor processes, and in those processes there are because of globalization, we also have international players. So in a country, in order to solve your problems, it's not only national level efforts you need. You also need local level and global level efforts, and they all should come together in solution of problems. You cannot solve certain problems with your local initiatives. You need national level regulations, but you also need international cooperation to solve those problems. So what kind of challenges, what kind of issue areas we have? I identified a number of issue areas. For instance, developments in technology and its consequences. How should we regulate technological changes and adjust already existing frameworks to those new technologies? For instance, we have e-commerce, we have e-government practices, and we have a number of new developments in our field, and they are trying to catch up with technological developments. But at the end of the day, the technology has a number of consequences on our lives. They need to be regulated, and you cannot do it alone. You should do it in cooperation with other countries in the world. And ecological challenges, that's my area of specialization. And sustainability, climate change, resilience of cities and urban areas and their infrastructure, disaster preparedness. These are all important issue areas, because you cannot solve those problems alone in your own country. Cooperation of countries, is a prerequisite for the solution of problems. And ecological problems, they are the real complex problems of our societies. But on the other hand, we have demographic challenges, especially in developed countries. We have aging populations, and in the rest of the world, there's a similar trend. And there's not only aging populations. On the other hand, we have migration problems, regulation of migration on the one hand, and again, regulation of refugees in all parts of the world is a major challenge for public policy and public administration. On the other hand, global economic and social inequality is also a major problem, because as long as you have those inequalities all around the world, so those people with problems in access to basic services or basic amenities, they will have a tendency to move to other parts of the world, and at the end of the day, that creates a problem of migration and refugees. Healthcare, as we have seen in pandemic, is an important issue, because like in other areas, in order to solve those kind of health problems, like pandemics, you need to cooperation of countries and all actors involved. Digital and educational divide, yes, this is an important issue, because digital divide between countries, digital divide between population segments is an important issue, because some sections of societies lack skills to be employed in the new sectors, and that's a major problem for most of the countries. On the other hand, we also have changing work practices, like work from home, remote work, and other similar issues, and they also need to be regulated. Political polarization in different parts of the world is an issue. The rise of denialism and the post-truth also pose problems. They are also complex problems for future. And finally, the globalization of trade and economic affairs is important. It has impacts on diverse populations all around the world. The globalization of trade and economy, they do not always bring advantages to populations. They also bring disadvantages, and at the end of the day, those communities who do not benefit from globalization has certain problems to be solved. And all those problems are interconnected problems. And the common point in all those issue areas is their interdependence and interconnectedness. What do I mean? They are connected to each other in a multitude of ways. So under normal conditions in 1960s, 1950s, we have an approach to problems, and it was a very much centralized approach. Governments expected to take certain decisions from the center, and then implement that in a top-down manner, in a sort of, in quotation, in a rational manner, and there was an expectation for the solution of problems. And but from 1980s onwards, or from 1970s onwards, we started to realize that compartmentalized and very specialized, nature of administration posed further problems for certain policy areas. For instance, environmental policy is a major example. It's a complex problem, and you cannot solve environmental problems, by focusing on only by giving mandates to only one ministry or secretary. And what else? We have disaster management. We have youth unemployment, and a number of other policy areas we have discussed in the previous page. They all have similar qualities. They are interdependent problems. They are interconnected to each other. And what you need to do is to work together to solve those problems. What I mean, ministries should work together in cooperation with each other. They should coordinate their efforts, but at the same time, you need to get involvement of, the local level players, national level players, and international global level players. So my argument is that we need to have an integrated approach, policy integration and policy coordination to solve those kind of complex problems. Let's give an example. The major example is climate change. Climate change is, under normal conditions, is about rising temperatures and unexpected irregular weather events. But it has ramifications on a number of areas, ranging from security to agriculture, health to infrastructure, nutrition to transport, and immigration to energy security. So, in all those areas, public authorities should take the impact of their decisions on climate change. This is what I mean by policy integration, because under normal conditions, compartmentalized, nature of administration do not care about the side effects of their, do not care much about the side effects of their activities. But in the 21st century, we should all take care about those dimensions, and we should realize that these are global problems, and to solve those problems, it's not only the cooperation of ministries in one country, but also the international cooperation is also a necessary condition for future generations. Globalization, of course, further complicates the process, and then the international dimension pose further challenges, and some of those problems are indeed wicked or super wicked problems. What do we mean by that? Wicked problems are, complex, but it's not easy to solve problems. I mean, in those occasions, there is no obvious solution, for instance, for wicked problems. There are many individuals and organizations involved, and there is disagreement among stakeholders, and desired behavior changes are the part of solution. And recently, there's a new term, super wicked problem situations, in which time is running out. For instance, if you are talking about global climate change, so we are not supposed to waste. We are not supposed to waste our time, and the time is running out. And those who cause the problem also seek to provide a solution. Central authority needed is to solve those problems are either weak or non-existent, and irrational discounting happens that push the responses into the future. Well, at the end of the day, public administration and public policy needs new approach to problems, and already existing administrative practices do not meet those complex and sometimes wicked challenges. And social network analysis, for instance, provides very useful insights to structural and schematic properties of complex networks in all those issue areas. But these are very important contributions, and there's a certain need for the study and analysis of all of the existing mechanisms and all of the existing complex networks. But the problem is, to my opinion, is not only about understanding the nature of those networks, but we should also understand the conditions of successful problem solving in those wicked problem areas, and we should then identify those conditions and then implement them to the rest of the world. And from 19 onwards, governance mechanisms, introduced as an answer, and involvement and participation of stakeholders proposed as a remedy to problems stemming from centralization. For instance, Agenda 21 provided as a blueprint for sustainability challenges, environmental problems, and involvement of youth, women, and farmers and other disadvantaged groups. It was proposed as a solution. However, there is rather limited progress in this respect, and there's in some parts of the world, we can speak about a re-centralization trend. And why I'm speaking of the limited progress in many cases, those participatory mechanisms, they haven't provided, substantial input to the system. Rather, it's like greenwashing, they provided certain justifications for already existing policies. They try to, somehow legitimate their already existing policies by introducing certain participatory mechanisms, but they were not very effective at the end of the day. And in my final slide, I will, and I think I am already. I'm yeah, I have a couple of minutes. And so how to improve governance mechanisms in all those issue areas, in against all those challenges? I agree that I argue that policy integration has possible answers, and there's we should improve the mechanisms for developing integrated policies, and that's something we should focus on. Interdisciplinarity in problem solving should also be remembered. It's something Charles Lindblom, I'm sorry, Laswell, recommended in 1950s. Yes, it's still an important asset for public policies. And Eleanor Ostrom's efforts towards better management of commons, her Nobel-winning initiative, she focused on local level initiatives and self-governing mechanisms. So we should also focus on her and her colleagues' findings to somehow develop mechanisms of cooperation at the local level and other levels. And I also argue for the importance of local level initiatives, but also the global level initiatives. And for instance, in the case of global climate change, we have local level networks, local government networks, local government and city networks. And those networks bypass sometimes national governments' initiatives, and they bring together local and global for the solution of a global problem. And I really, appreciate those kind of initiatives. So at the end of the day, we should establish links between local and global players towards a better integrated approach to problems. Policy coordination mechanisms should be developed at all levels. However, at the end of the day, this is a political struggle with losers and winners, and those people who care and the involvement of all stakeholders. And by stakeholders, I mean those people who care about their future still counts. And we should also, struggle. You should also, try hard to develop those kind of mechanisms, to solve complex and wicked problems of 21st century. Thanks very much for inviting me to give this talk, and it was a real pleasure. It was a real pleasure to be with you from Turkey. I joined your conference, and we could also, if you have questions, I could also provide answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Gökhan Orhans. It is very, very wonderful and great presentations to deliver and make us easily to understand the digital era, the problem in digital era, and also the challenges of governance itself, and also public problems still become complex problem because the digital era make borderless area become closer and closer. Then I invite to the participants, both of online or offline participant, you can have questions. Please raise your hand, or you can type your question in the Q&A menu. Before the participant have a question, Professor, I have something come from my mind that when Professor mentioned it, that we have to try to integrate local stakeholder and also global stakeholders in terms of investment, in terms of economical approach. Sometimes dealing with both local players and also global player, it's very difficult to make the consensus between them. Do you have like an opinion about these situations?
Yeah. The example I gave from climate change, for instance, climate change is a global issue, as a global complex problem, and you need the involvement of all parties. But under normal conditions, national level, nation states and national level players play major roles, and sometimes they drag their foot in, solving, in making moves towards solving climate change related problems. So in that respect, sometimes localities, because environmental problems, emerge from, rise from a locality, but at the end of the day, they also, negatively affect localities. So local level is the place where you implement policies concerning climate change. But sometimes your national government, puts barriers. In those occasions, sometimes bringing together those, global initiatives, developed by EU, European, I'm sorry, United Nations, and all those initiatives somehow, provide information about, and financial resources for, certain initiatives to solve global climate change problems. For instance, local governments learn about inventories. They learn about how to, improve their infrastructure. So they learn a lot from those networks. And at the end of the day, the knowledge from global level somehow enlighten those players at the local level, and that, produce very fruitful results. And in those occasions, players with similar concerns, similar targets, similar objectives may come together easily. But in your question, if there is a disagreement between those global players and local players, then we should find a midway. But I mean, a mediation mechanism between those two players that serves the interest of both groups of players should be implemented, I guess.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your response. Once again, I invite participants to ask questions to the keynote speakers that we already invite from Bandirmas universities. Participants, do you have any questions? You can raise hand and also put it in the chat box. Okay, we have a question from Miss Ilima Fitri Asmi. Please, operator, can you help to Miss Ilima to open her mix? Please, Miss Ilima, you can deliver your questions.
Okay, thank you very much. My question will be simple: how to actually fulfill the expectation of the citizens and the society while the demand of public service is getting increasing day by day, and how government should cope with that? That's only my question. Thank you.
You are talking about rising demands from societies at the local level. Am I right? Well, the involvement of local communities, also put pressure on local governments and central government units. I can see that, and I agree with that. But at the end of the day, the answer to those kind of questions are, transparency. What do I mean by transparency? If you have a transparent approach towards, your revenues, your resources, your income, and how to, and at the end of the day, if you open up this process to involvement of those players, then populations or stakeholders may accept all those limitations, and mechanisms like referendums or citizen chambers, they all contribute to sort out that problem, I guess. Because in every society, the demands, when you have, let's talk about your income and your expenditures as a government authority, and all the time you have the rising demands, that's for sure. In order to limit, it's not possible to limit those demands, but if you introduce transparent mechanisms, that shows your revenues and expenditures in a transparent manner, then a mutual understanding may be reached. That's the only answer I could provide, to be honest.
Thank you very much for the response. Very clear and inspirations to have several other opinions about the governance problem in the digital era. Then I invite one more opportunity for participants to have a questions. Any participant will ask questions? Okay, then finally, time always become our limit, Professor, because you already deliver very interesting concepts. Then I will make a conclusion from your presentation today. I have 3 conclusions. The first, government needs stakeholders to involve in solving many kind of public problems. Then second, interconnectedness of problem needs more integrated approach. Then governance approach can become solutions with note that interlink between local and global stakeholders. That is my conclusion from a wonderful and great presentation from Professor Kokan Orhans. Then thank you very much, Professor, we are very, very happy to have you today, and we will move to the next agenda is splitting every presenter to their rooms. Then once again, thank you very much, Professor, for your time, opinion, and also your wonderful presentation today.
I thank you for your invitation, and sometimes in keynote speeches you need to be provocative, and you should be throw ideas, that I hope that talk brought certain question marks, or certain I brought certain ideas to the minds of participants. I wish you all the best and a successful conference, and I'm sending my best regards from Turkey to our sisters and brothers in Indonesia.
Yes, Professor, thank you so much. Then once again, thank you so much for having you in International Conference on Public Administration and Governance 2023. Thank you so much, Professor. Then we will move to the next sessions. All presenter will be joined in the breakout rooms. Then please prepare your presentation, and we will have moderator in each rooms. That's all for me as a moderator in this